Well, hello, Angie Gray.
Hello, James Lee.
I love talking to you, and for once, we get to actually record it and listen back to. Have you ever had conversations with either me or anybody, and you're like, man, I wish I had a recording of that. That was such a good conversation.
I do all the time.
Yeah. Well, this will be one of those now. So,
Excellent. Thank you.
where in the world are you? Where do you call home?
In Iowa, right kind
Iowa.
of smack dab in the middle of Iowa. We live on an acreage. I'm looking very bright sun in my face and my glasses being all
Hmm.
reflective, but I have a beautiful view of the country. So yeah, we live
Oh.
in the middle of Iowa.
That's amazing. I think we occasionally get to see a photo of like
Yeah.
your view or the scene. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Luckily, I mean, it's tempting to do it all the time because I do love it here. I do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's something really wonderful about the space that you're in. Certainly informs the way that you feel and your work, and I'm sure I am preaching to the choir actually on that one,
Mhm.
on the importance of like just life harmony.
Yeah.
And you post about that on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
about the importance of reconnecting or disconnecting, I guess, however you look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Yeah.
just posted something about that the other day that I responded to because we have that in common that I'm just learning. I love to make sure that my space feels good. It doesn't always feel good for real. Like if I could,
Yeah.
give you a 360 right now, we just got back from our cabin. It does not
Yeah.
feel homey right now. But yeah, it is important. I love to make sure the space feels good. And for other people. I
Yeah.
love people to come into my home or into my Zoom space
Hmm.
and have it feel nice. And yours looks really nice.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I was commenting on Marissa Gardner's post about,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was a little line in her post that said I might redo my whole home office. And actually, I just spent time this summer redoing everything that you see
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
top to bottom.
That's
I
fun.
redid all of that.
Looks great. I love the
Yeah.
glasses in the background.
Oh yeah, look, it's the
Yeah, yeah,
bear.
yeah. Those are great. Yeah.
Isn't that cool? Can you see it's a
Yeah.
bear for bear
Oh, I
wise.
can see the bear. The bear kind of blends in there. Oh, I can see it
Yeah.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It's
Yeah.
hidden. It's hidden back there, but
Very subtle. Very subtle.
yeah, I don't know why, but the bear has become a spirit animal of sorts,
Ooh,
for
should we
me.
talk about that? Spirit
We
animal?
should. Yeah,
Okay.
and I'd love to know if you've identified one for yourself.
Yeah. And I
You
have two.
have?
Well, yes.
Really?
I say I have two,
Okay.
if that's legal. It is, oh, this is very personal. This is fun. It's the eagle, the bald eagle.
Okay.
Don't know why, have no idea why. I don't care for birds necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Although I say, oh, I must be getting old because now I really do like birds. I find myself very fascinated with them.
Yeah.
But the bald eagle is very cool for me. And I've had sort of experiences with them where like I shouldn't be seeing one there.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool. I really like them. And then horses. So we have horses.
Mm.
Horses have been a great teacher for me. So I have two.
Yeah. Well, I think you can have two. If it were my children, they would just blend those two into like a horse
Oh,
eagle
yes,
thing,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes, something out of Harry Potter for sure, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For me, it was when I was leaving the kind of corporate world of senior living. This was back in 2020. You're right. This is very personal, but
It is.
it's so on brand for James and Angie.
Yes, it is.
Um, in 2020, which was 12 years into my senior living career, I think a lot of a lot of people have a shared story or a similar story like this where when you love a profession deeply as you and I do, we also feel the frustrations deeply.
Mhm.
And during that time, I was in the depth of frustration with the work that I do, and not so much the output, not so much not our heart, in what we put into the work, but I think if we're being very, very plain, the systems of work,
Yeah.
the corporatization of taking care of elders, there's so much of it that when you're a caregiver at heart, you are at odds with the business kind of mechanics of, this industry a lot. But long story short, it was just kind of that kind of point in my life where it's like, am I going to actually do this? Am I going to try to go on
Mhm.
my own, solopreneur, self-employed, which is, by the way, why I wanted to talk to you about this on this podcast. Um, and I was scared, of course. I mean, anybody who dares or ventures to stand on their own 2 feet and make their own version of something that feels safe, going through somebody else's company, getting a job feels safe. But you have all these self negotiations,
Yeah, yeah,
along the way.
yeah.
And so obviously there's a much longer story here, but to get to the bear, um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, by the way, there's that. I was trying to come up with a company name for my consulting work and everything. And it is really hard to name a company, especially
Yes, so
something of your
stressful.
own,
I
right?
know it is. It's a big decision because in
It
my
is.
mind, I'm like once I say it, I can never change it. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so I went through all of the, brainstorming of what I wanted to name my company. And ultimately, I arrived at Bearwise. And one, it was partly because I like company names where you can't immediately tell just by the company name,
Hmm.
what do you do? Like
Yeah,
Nike isn't a thing,
that's true.
right? So,
That's so true. Now I'm gonna.
and
Now I want to change my name of my business. Thanks, James.
I know, I know. I blow up people's plans a lot. Um, but for me, the way that I arrived at Bearwise, I thought about all the things that I want to stand for, the things that I felt embodied kind of the spirit of the work I wanted to do. And ultimately, it comes down to wisdom and like practiced wisdom versus knowledge versus being smart, being intelligent. Wisdom is a hard thing because you are constantly acquiring new knowledge, you're changing your own habits and your own behaviors. Wisdom is practiced knowledge, right? And so wisdom I knew had to be in there somewhere, and then I realized talking through it with my wife, all my great ideas happened from talking to Piper.
That's awesome.
Um, I was explaining to her that wisdom is not easy, and that it is a much harder thing to strive toward and acquire and practice, and that you actually don't gain wisdom, you bear the hard process of gaining wisdom. And
Mm,
so for me, bear was actually not about the animal itself, but the, like, think about anything you have to bear. It's a struggle, it's a pain, but on the other side of it is something really beautiful.
yeah.
So for me, it was, you are bearing the arduous journey of gaining wisdom, and then I shortened that to Bearwise, and then the logo for the bear just kind of came to fruition after that. And then, in terms of like the spirit animal aspect of a bear, I love that it's just a lot of bears are, they're not necessarily pack animals like wolves and dogs and
Yeah.
yeah, but they have a deep, connection certainly like to their cubs and things like that. But a lot of times bears are resilient because they sometimes have to journey alone, and but I think that is very symbolic of personal growth, is that you can get other partners in your journey, you can have coaches, you can have other people who are accountable, but at the end of the day, the process of gaining wisdom is yours. Like,
Yeah.
you have to do it, you have to do the hard work. So that's where
Good. That's good.
Pairwise came from.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that with me. Yeah, I love bears too. I
Yeah.
had to choose. I had to let you have the bear. That would have been weird. No, that's beautiful story, James. That is super meaningful. And maybe that's why the eagle thing for me too, that
Mm,
just embodies that also very yeah, they just look wise. They look
yeah.
confident. They're on their own. They look, they're very solo-y as far as
Hmm.
just look at one and it's like, okay, I can put my confidence in that, right? Looking at
Yeah.
also though they mate for life,
Hmm.
it's very cool. But yeah, anyway, that's a cool
Yeah.
story. That's a really cool story.
Well, eagles in general, there's kind of a metaphor that John Maxwell uses in his book. I forget which one it is, but
Yes.
we'll link it later. But eagles versus ducks.
Yes, do
You know,
that. Oh, and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting too because okay, now we're gonna go all over the place like we thought we
Hmm.
might. I
Yes.
I have a thing with my kids, so we have seven, and when we would go places, I would say, "Where's my ducks?" And they'd
Hmm.
all quack. So I don't know if you can see that, if I should show this on camera or not, but that
Oh, yeah, amazing.
son carved that out, and
Yeah.
some of our kids, and those are our grandbabies. But anyway,
Oh,
so anyway,
that's so
back
cool.
to James or John Maxwell.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
the story though, but yes.
Yeah, and it's so it's really representative of, I think, the spirit of you, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know these last year and a half, almost 2 years, right around the time you started having a presence around LinkedIn. And I
Mm,
know that was a conscious decision for you, so I do want to come back to that. But the spirit of the bear, for me, or the eagle for you. You're right that a lot of times, I think John Maxwell talks about, like, eagles don't they don't worry about, like, ducks don't go to eagle school, and
yeah,
eagles don't go to other schools. I'm definitely butchering this, but the idea that an eagle soars above everything and really has to see the big picture, and um, it's a lot harder for me to, like, draw these comparisons now, because you have just told me that you think of your family as ducks and ducklings, and I'm like, okay,
yeah.
wait,
Let's go with a
John
more
Maxwell.
powerful imagery. Okay, I
Yeah,
mean that to me is very powerful. But yes, the eagle thing. Yeah,
yeah.
it is. It is very being able to see the big picture. But I'm going to let you keep going with it because you're doing a great job.
Oh, well, from what I gathered about at least John Maxwell's point, the animals themselves could be interchanged with whatever
Yeah,
makes sense. But the principle behind it is that when you are growing, when you are a leader, and when you are challenging yourself, I think, in the spirit of this whole bear and eagle discussion, is that leaders have a lot of hard work. It's a lot of self work more than anything. And
yeah,
I've learned that again and again. I wish I learned it sooner in my career, but I'm glad I learned it now, that leadership is, like, it's almost 100% self work, and that the impact of that self work um, affects other people.
yeah,
But I can't recall how many times I worked for somebody that either they were smart, or they had good relationships, etc. But at the end of the day, they didn't do their own self growth
yeah,
work. Like, you can always see the limitations of other people, especially if they're elevated into leadership roles. Um, but yeah, I remember in my earlier roles, being a first time manager, being expected to hire and train and develop people. I had no tools, I had no resources. It was just, and I look back and think, what a poor job I did. But I have to give my younger self, a little bit of grace there, that I only did what I observed on
yeah,
TV, or in at the workplace.
yeah. Well, you
And
did your best. You did your best at that,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
And I think maybe that's where a lot of the inspiration behind Level Up actually comes from, that pain point that I didn't learn leadership from my supervisors and my managers and my company. I learned the hard way of doing it wrong, and then I realized, going back to that idea about bearing the solo journey of wisdom, I was like, well, let's share that with other people. And
Yeah,
so, you know. Sharing content, doing leadership development work, even though it is self work, some people need to share that story so that other people can be invited into their own introspection.
yeah.
Yeah.
A nurse on LinkedIn that I follow, and I won't be able to say his last name, and that bums
Mm-hmm.
me out. We'll have to put that in the comments too. Christian is his name.
Mm-hmm.
He's a nurse, not in senior living, but he was on the other day, and he said, so, and he's great. He's a great thought leader. He says amazing things. I love reading his content, and he
Mm-hmm.
said something about people asked me recently had asked him why aren't you posting on LinkedIn? So you can watch his journey,
Yeah.
and me being in this perspective, watching his journey. He used to be on all the time, and then he went back, and then he was kind of sharing with us why he's kind of stepping back, and then
Yeah.
he hadn't been on for a minute and came on the other day and said, people have been asking me why I don't put more content on. And he wanted to know, he said, so sometimes I do, when I do, it comes from, my heart. And if I'm going to respond to something, I go in the DMs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then he asked the audience what we thought. And, to be honest, we don't always have time to, I always want to have
Yeah.
a thoughtful, authentic response when I'm responding. And that, if we're being honest here, it takes a lot of time. Speaking of
A lot of time.
entrepreneurship, it
Yeah.
takes a lot of time, and I never just want to whatever. Anyway, so I responded to him, and for me, in relationship to what you just said, James,
Mm-hmm.
is it became social media. Like I first began to share. I don't know if it was this recording or the first attempt that we had at this.
A little behind the scenes. Yeah.
I don't know actually, but social media became actually pretty toxic for me in my mind, because it was my mindset of how I was thinking of it. It's this chore, and
Yeah.
have so much to share, and I don't, all the things that go into wanting to do it well. And I'm an overthinker a lot of times, and wanting to do it well. Uh, but I said, when my mindset shifted, it was last August, right when I made the decision to also come to Think Tank.
Mm.
My mindset shifted around that. And for me, that my mindset is directly related to my inner guidance. And so it
Yeah.
was like a whole thing for me, this gentle nudging to go, oh, so you could probably think of that differently, because I was feeling frustrated that I wasn't working. Like I wasn't having myself as a speaker, as a
Mm-hmm.
coach, as a trainer. I hadn't had work for like
Yeah.
4 months, and so I was feeling like, oh, I have all this in me, and it feels frustrating. I want to get it out, and I felt like so desperate. Like, what am I doing here? Am I making an impact? So I'm kind of jumping into this next segue.
Yeah.
But what happened was that shift in my mindset, the gentle nudging, the shift in my mindset that, oh, hey, this actually is your work.
Mm-hmm.
This is your work.
Yeah.
Your job, your ultimate purpose is to serve others. And so here's your space, you get to do that. So just
Yeah.
do it, and do it authentically. Stop shutting down your voice because you're afraid that other people aren't going to maybe see it the way you do, or you're going to off-put someone because you're talking about maybe not things everyone on LinkedIn talks about. So that
Yeah.
was a big mindset shift for me that really changed everything. And then, honestly, that led to Think Tank,
Mm.
led to, every meeting I was having, which I was having these great opportunities for meetings. In every meeting, I would ask, hey, I'm having a lot of these amazing meetings with amazing human beings, but I feel it's important so if I was having that meeting with you, I
Yeah.
feel like this has been great, and I feel like it's important because there's such an urgency, I think, and I think we're feeling
Mm-hmm.
it consciously and unconsciously, that I ask you if there is a way for us to work together, because we're
Yeah.
all doing these separate things, which is fine. But the
Mm-hmm.
urgency, I think, is calling us to be together, to connect and see
Yeah.
the question, what could we do together? How can I support you? You support me.
Mm-hmm.
Together, do something to have the voice heard, to turn the ship around. It's time for us to come together. And so that's what I started asking people. And it was so cool.
Yeah.
I actually led it with, so I'm sitting here at my desk,
Mm-hmm.
and I look out into the field, like I mentioned, either in this conversation or the previous one.
Yeah.
And I would, like, this is my body language. I'm going, I'm like, I know where I'm headed.
Yeah.
And I know many people are too. And I would say, I need those people to understand I'm a spiritual person. I'm not religious. It's all inclusive. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But I want you to know my stuff, it's felt deeply. Like you
Yeah.
did, you already said that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you align with that and you feel like we are being called from a deeper space
Yeah.
to connect the head and the heart, then that's where I'm going. And it was very cool because people then would lean in. And we did talk about this, I think, James, in one
Yeah.
of the last long conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And people would be like, as soon as that permission was given, like so many people in my life have given me, people would be like, yeah, and they would lean in, and we'd start talking about the real things, not the typical conference things, not the typical
Mm-hmm.
meeting things, but the things that I think are so relevant right now and that really are important to turn the ship around, if you will. But anyway,
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
to Christian's thing, I said that in my comment in much shorter version,
Mm-hmm.
and I was actually thinking about it yesterday. I'm like, man, I hope that didn't sound like, oh, Christian, you should be thinking of it this
Hmm.
way. So there's
Yeah.
that in social media. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing I think about with LinkedIn or any content, really, I just had this reflection while you were talking that content marketing is just a fancy business term that we use for storytelling.
Yeah,
And,
yes.
it's just storytelling in whatever medium, is appropriate for your business. But I think the disconnect for a lot of people where I really drew on this concept of head plus heart, head and heart, that was something within Bearwise Consulting, when I finally launched and said, okay, this is what I want to do. A lot of times I think that people don't find clarity in their own story or their own thing that they're trying to create, that other people don't know how to opt in.
Hmm.
A lot of people know how to opt out, but a lot of people, what you need to do, what we need to do as individuals and as companies is, here's the clarity of our story. Here's what we
Hmm.
stand for. Here's the thing that we're trying to create or change.
Hmm.
And then you allow people to opt in. You're like, oh, I'm about that.
Yeah.
Yes, sign me up. I want to go to Think Tank. I want to work with you at Fairwise. I want to partner with Telegrove. It is your responsibility to know your story and tell your story, which was the theme of Think Tank. Um, and on LinkedIn, I think a lot of people don't know what story they're trying to tell. So they end up just, it's the social media like default of just share every thought that comes into your head.
Yeah.
But then people don't really understand, what is your story, what do you stand for, and how should I opt in or opt out.
Mhm.
And so head and heart, where that came from several years ago with Bearwise, I had this reflection that, okay, there's a lot of people in senior living that are all head, they're all business. They're all, one track minded about the business responsibilities that they have. Not good or bad, but that's just how they operate.
Mhm.
Then I also recognize that there's a huge faction of people in senior living that are all heart. They
Mhm.
leaned heavily on emotions and stories and love and all the things that are good, but they lacked the business acumen to be credible in the
Yeah.
spaces that they needed to be in. And I realized both are a disservice. If you're just head or just heart, you got to have both. And going back to the earlier about the arduous journey of gaining wisdom as a leader, is that it's up to you. You got to get head and heart together. And so it was a challenge for myself not to be too heavily swinging one way or the other, like understand
Yes.
business, know
Yes.
my chops,
Yep.
but also understand, how do you advance relationships? How do you gain self-awareness? What are the things you should be developing and working on from the EI side of things, so that at the end of the day, we want to be effective,
Yeah.
right? You and
Yeah.
I don't want to be at the end of our careers saying, well, we were shouting from the mountaintops our whole lives, and I guess nobody wanted to change.
But they thought I was really nice.
Right, exactly. It's like, oh, well, I was such a good person, and that is a
That's great.
foundational thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And it is. It is for me because gosh, I was just thinking about this yesterday
Mm,
also. It is a constant. It is a constant. How do I share how powerful I think the things that I'm talking to that lean more towards heart, and then
mhm,
also bring in the head because I think they're my cause is very much they're the same thing, one
mhm.
without the other, like you just said. You'll never realize your fullest potential unless we have both. But
Yeah.
in content marketing, whatever, telling your story, it for me is a constant thing where I have to be thinking about I don't want to be unbalanced. And sometimes,
Mhm,
like you've said so many times, don't let great get in the way of good. Sometimes it
mhm.
is that. Sometimes it is okay. And how many times you reread through your stuff and want to make sure it's speaking to your audience and inviting them in. Yeah, that is a tough part. That is
Yeah.
the toughest part for me.
Yeah. Well, that self work that we do out loud, I
Yeah.
think that's where it crosses into thought leadership. Is that it goes from just general content marketing to a very specific subset of content marketing, which is thought leadership, and that thought leaders clearly stand for or against something.
Yeah.
And it was a conversation. Oh, I have a I have a cat trying to
Oh,
get into my office here.
oh,
Let
your
me,
cat. I can't
you
believe
know,
mine's not here already.
I'm gonna just leave the recording on
Yes,
and
welcome your cat
invite
in,
my
please.
cat. Yes.
Yes, please. Usually mine's
Yeah,
walking across in
it's
front of me.
and as soon as I do that, she ran
She's
away.
like,
Okay, now she's coming back. We'll see her in a moment.
okay, cool.
Um, Jersey, my cat's name is Jersey. She just
Cool.
interrupted my train of thought about content marketing, thought
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah.
So a specific subset of content marketing, which is thought leaders, they clearly stand for and against something. And one of the things that I've learned to tie it back to what you were just saying is how do you tell your story in a way where obviously all the things we think and feel are critical and important to us, but why does it matter to somebody else?
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
would they opt in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if people don't opt in, you don't create change. So,
Mhm.
that's the head part of storytelling is how do you do it in an effective way that you actually get to the results that you're looking for, changed behavior in ourselves, in the companies, and in the industry. So, thought leaders, the sorry, can you hear that? My dog and my cat are they're interacting here under my table. Um, all right, my editor is going to have a heck of a
Oh,
time
this will be fun. Thank you,
putting
editor.
all of this
Are you
together,
the
right?
editor?
What's that?
Are you the editor?
I am not the editor. Yeah, no, I've got a good
I'd
person
be like,
helping me out.
my editor is gonna be like,
It's, that would be funny if it were me. Um, no, the execution of thought leadership and the specific point I'm trying to make here is that um, when we tell our story, we have to actually be channeling our audience's story. And
yeah.
that's a real like nuance that a lot of people I think miss. I miss it sometimes, and so I have to remind myself. I think about every great LinkedIn post, every great speaking engagement, things that people really remember. They are not recalling my story. They're not telling my story. They're saying, "Hey, when you said that thing on LinkedIn, it made me think about," and
Yes.
it is always their own personal
The
experience.
greatest compliment. Yeah, the
Yeah,
greatest reassurance that okay, something that
right.
I'm doing is connecting.
Yeah, and that's what story is that you are using your own story as a vehicle for your audience's story,
Yes,
right? You
yes.
have to tell their story through your content. And so I think a lot of times, whether it's, Angie's high performance nursing or think tank or whatever thing we're trying to say on LinkedIn or any other platform, I look at it before I hit post, I look at it and I think, is my audience's story reflected in this post, or is this just my own ramblings, my own thoughts? you know and that is the criteria that either makes me hit send or
Yes.
post, or go back to the drawing board about like, okay, I kind of went off the rail here and this is just James Lee ranting.
Mhm.
And it's not so obvious as to say like, hey guys, here's your story, but what are the universal themes in the thing that I'm posting that other people are going to resonate with, and
Mhm.
will it compel them to an action? And that's the thing that we have to put in our content is you either have to directly say here's the call to action, or
Yeah.
it has to be very very clearly implied, like here's the problem, but wouldn't it be nice if this solution, right? So you're implying a call to action, and it
Mhm.
allows people to opt in or not. And I think that is the thing that a lot of people miss in storytelling is they think it's just about tell a creative story about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and that is a really, really tough part because I don't love a call to action. I mean,
Yeah, nobody
like a
does.
straightforward call to action,
Hmm.
that doesn't ever feel good for me. It never does.
Right.
I mean, I love sales. We're all, doing it for hopefully good reasons. But I never like that. So yeah, that for me too is at the end is like, how do I engage you for you to really authentically feel that I want to know what you think?
Right.
What you think, I want to hear your perspective. I want to invite in. That's a really hard part. And that takes a lot of time also.
It does.
It takes a lot of time.
It's an
Um,
insane amount of time to invest into LinkedIn, much less the overall concept of
yeah.
content marketing. This is a real meta thing, but let's dig into it. So you are actually the most likely to be able to answer this and give proof of concept to everything I just said.
Okay.
You technically, if we just look at this as a business,
Mhm.
you purchased Think Tank last year.
I
You
did.
purchased Think Tank this year. So customer, seller, right?
Yep.
Um, and if you think about from your own perspective, what were the things. Like I posted a ton of content about Think Tank,
Mhm.
and I didn't have a ton of CTAs. I didn't have a direct like you should go. Here's the invitation. Sign up. There are some like that, but I would imagine those weren't the things that made you say, "Oh, good thing James put a call to action here. Otherwise, dummy me, I wouldn't have known what to do." Right. So a lot of that thought process of think tank and content and all of that had to reflect Angie's story, not James Lee's story. So
Right.
did
Very
it?
good.
And you're the one who can actually attest to whether or not it did. Why did you say yes to think tank?
Yeah. Exactly everything you just said is why.
Mhm.
Because your story, and again, I think I was so desperate at that point to connect and collaborate with people that were
Mhm.
like-minded that I knew were going there, right?
Right.
Could tell by your content that that's where you were going,
Right.
and people that I was reading comments within there, um,
Mhm.
in your
Yeah.
in your stuff, in your stories. So that was it. It was like it was a hell yes. Sorry if that has to be bleeped out, but it
Mhm.
was. There was one quick thinking, one quick thought of this isn't in my budget.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, one quick thought of that, and then it was like, oh no, I just can't keep second guessing. This
Yeah.
is it's going. Yeah, we got to go because I have to grow. So can I add
Mhm.
this? This isn't to
Yeah.
say that this thing that I created was really cool or anything, but it was profound for me at the time, and
Mhm.
it happened when I was doing my keynote at 12 Oaks. I had thought of this the night before, and it was, the saying when it says when you're not when the plant becomes stagnant and doesn't grow, it dies,
Mhm.
right? And so
Mhm.
this thing, maybe somebody else out there has done this, so forgive me if I'm acting like I'm stealing it. But it came to me like, oh, okay, so that is what happens for people when we're not growing, we become stagnant, and what happens to us is we don't physically die, but we become miserable. And
Mhm.
that's where I was. It felt like, oh, I need this is a natural progression for me.
Yeah.
I align with these people. I align with what James is saying. And I want to be part of that collaboration to serve at a higher level. And I knew I had to go, or I was going to stay here,
Right.
metaphorically, where I was and feeling that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
Was your
Well,
story?
it's
Yeah.
it's a great, again, it's a very meta discussion because now we're talking about um, the topical thing about content marketing, call to action, storytelling, and then the specific thing underneath it, which was you purchased something based on my content marketing of a thing.
Right.
And then now we're talking about how do we do that, moving forward for other people. But the
Yeah.
element of it's not a small thing, Angie. The thing that popped in your head of this is not in my budget. Think about, replace the word budget with constraint. I have a constraint. And
Yes.
sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's, you know, effort, whatever the constraint is. Think about, you know, in every business, we are dealing with people's constraints.
Yeah.
If they didn't have constraints, they would have solved the problem themselves.
Right.
So there's always going to be a barrier, there's going to be a constraint, but the person selling the solution has to make the viability of that solution more impactful than the pain point of their constraint.
Yep.
So at some point you decided $2,500, that's a lot. I didn't budget it.
Yep.
And then I got to pay for my airfare. I got to do all that.
Yep.
So that's the pain point. That's the constraint. But something about the content around the prospect of what this would be for you, you were like, I got to do it,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
the viability of the solution was stronger than the pain point of the constraint.
Yeah.
And whether you're a solopreneur, or self-employed or leading an organization, I think that's still the same thing at heart, is that you are anticipating people's problems or understanding people's problems, anticipating the constraints that they have that are keeping them from solving it themselves,
Mhm.
and then creating a very, very compelling and clear story of here's how we think we might be able to help. Do you want
Mhm.
to opt in?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
that's really good. For me too, it was the opportunity cost. That was in my mind too. Like, okay, if I don't go, again, going back to if I don't go personally, what's
Hmm.
my opportunity cost like me as a human?
Right.
And
Right.
then my business too. I knew I was going to be in a room with people that were big thinkers and that
Yeah.
wanted to work together and we're going in the same direction and had the head and heart,
Yeah.
of that's how we're going to do this. Both things
Yeah.
happening together. So yeah, and definitely the ROI, both personally and
Yeah.
professionally. I can directly relate over the last year almost, nine, however long it's been, nine to
Yeah.
9 months.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, really good. I had like five different thoughts as you were saying that, and now they're all gone. But um,
Well, it's a sign of a good conversation, and we're recording it, so you and I, if nobody else listens to this episode, Angie and
we need
James
to go
will
back.
listen back on it. Um, but it is a really, I got to say, when I think back on the think tank and I think about you, Angie, there are moments of our lives, of our careers, where, look, at the end of the day, like, we're all artists saying, here's the thing that I painted and I hope somebody else likes it,
Woo,
right?
yes, yes.
And you are one of those people, Angie, and it's not just for me. I know you do this for many others. Is that if you paint something and you put it up on the wall, you want somebody like Angie Gray on the other side of it, looking at it like, oh, that's so beautiful, you
Mm,
know. And I think that's what we do for people when something resonates with us and it affected us. That pause, that the person looking at that painting saying, "Oh, that's so beautiful,"
yeah,
it means so much to the person who just created that art.
yeah,
And so whether it's the think tank or Bella Grows or any of the art that I'm creating, it's a huge risk to put it on that canvas, and you're hoping there's going to be some art patron like you on the other side of it. And when that happens, it keeps the momentum of
yeah,
that courage, right?
yeah.
And so
Yes.
you are creating your own art in the work that you do, which, after what, 30, 40 minutes of talking, we're finally going to get around to me asking you about your work. But I would like to know about that from that lens of, if you were to consider your work as art, the thing that you're creating out of some courage and saying, this is a status quo that I see, this is a changed future that I hope I can help us get to. Tell me a little bit about your work. What do you do today that feels important and compelling, and why do you do it?
Okay, hold that thought because I want to say something that I don't.
Hmm.
I think it links to this, but what
Yeah.
you said about being us creating art. I feel like if there's anything, and there's more to this, but a big part of it is, and why was so honored to do the sponsorship for Think Tank
Hmm.
was because it's that feeling of being around other artists is what made me go, oh.
Mm.
It's not a comparison, but it's a reflection, right?
Yeah.
So you talking with Anna or Jean
Hmm.
or Aaron
Yeah.
or Joanna, whoever, all the people that were there, Nicole, all the
Hmm.
great people, reflecting back to me who I am,
Hmm.
right? And so if there's something that I think that happens when I get to do that too. And so it's very, very cool to have like people that don't get that opportunity, be able to come and be part of that,
Yeah.
so that they go, oh, actually, I have some thoughts that are worthy of talking about. I
Right.
don't just have to be in this tiny little thing. Not that that's not effective and impactful and meaningful,
Hmm.
but also how cool is that? So that, I don't know if that made sense, but it's very, because that is part of what Think Tank did for me, feeling
Yeah.
like I was okay, like, okay,
Hmm.
this is great. So anyway,
Yeah.
that part is cool. That part is
Yeah.
very, very cool. And to realize I actually am an artist. And that's a
Hmm.
great way to put it. And you all are actually also. You
Yeah.
also said, and I'm going all over the place, but also you said at Think Tank that I loved so much. You put words to what I have said in different ways, and it was so good. We were talking about purpose, Anna Hall, amazing.
Hmm.
Talking about purpose, and you clarified that, you know, so for me, my purpose is not high performance nursing.
Right.
My
Right.
purpose isn't in senior living. That just happens to be the assignment that I
Yeah.
have, that I've
Right.
chosen. But my purpose goes with me wherever I go. My purpose is an
Right.
extension of who I am. And you said it even better than that. You said, my purpose isn't senior living. My purpose is wherever I am. It goes with me wherever I am.
Right. Right.
So that was really beautiful. And that was a big thing that I think was important for me to hear at that time as well. But
Yeah.
anyway, that
Well,
was
yeah, I love that, and it gives me a moment to reflect on this. It's something as I learn these things for myself, and especially if they are impactful as the thing you just shared or reflected back to me about purpose, I find it important to relay that, and that's
yeah,
really what the spirit of Level Up podcast is like, let's reflect on these things and let's go share it,
yeah,
and let other people copy that and create their own. And so one of the books that I love is Steal Like an Artist, by Austin
yeah.
Kleon. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a very cool read. It's not like a big dense book. It's a lot of photos and infographics, but if you haven't read it before, Steal Like an Artist, what it did for me was it changed my perspective about, oh, everybody copies, artists just copy really, really well. And so I was like, okay, it gave me permission to think about, I don't need to create original like
Yeah.
works of art. I
Right.
need to create my own original version of works of art.
Yes.
And so this idea about purpose, and Anna is such a great person to like shepherd us to these kinds of
Mm,
realizations. And I was so happy that she said yes and came to Think Tank. She'll
mm.
be back this
Yes.
year.
Yes.
Um, so the thing that I said was, senior living is not my purpose, but senior living is where I practice my purpose.
Yeah.
And none of us, none of our jobs, none of our titles, none of our companies are our purpose. Those are the vehicles of our purpose.
Yes.
And so for me, realizing like one of the things that is deeply ingrained in me that God gave me, that I have within myself, that wherever it came from, it's a part of me, is to create.
Mm-hmm.
And so that side of me of creating, I can think back to little toddler James of tinkering with stuff and like taking something apart and putting it into a new configuration. And I think uh, kids do that. Like they'll take stickers from the dinosaur book and stickers from the medical book. And they'll figure out a new like story with it, right? Which my daughter has a lot of that in her. But reflecting on my entire life now, okay, I've always wanted to create stuff. Writing is about creating,
Mm-hmm.
playing music is about creating, cooking for people, it's about creating.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized, okay, part of my purpose in life is to create, to synthesize, be inspired by other people, and then create my own recipe for that thing, and then share it with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's my purpose, now I know what my vehicles, senior living, think tank, Bearwise, podcast, LinkedIn. Now I know that those are just vehicles to exercise my purpose, which is to create change, either for myself or for other people, right? And so when you have that deep clarity about your purpose, it becomes so impactful. And I remember how earth shattering that was for me. And I was like, well, it's going to be important for other people.
Yeah.
So I love that it is something that deeply touched you. I can't quite trace where that aha moment came for me, but it is something that I'm really proud of, that whether it's through a LinkedIn post or think tank or something, I'm really proud of the fact that people will attribute an aha moment specific to something I created.
Wow.
And it makes me want to create more stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's just another way of saying what you said earlier,
Yeah.
just that if it draws people in and connects with their story and makes them not talk about your story, but how it relates to their story. That's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
What's really cool about you, Angie, is that I'm gonna see it when I play back this video. I can tell when somebody else is like really jamming, right? I find this a lot when I can appreciate an artist like on stage and they're just like in the
yep.
zone, they're lost, right? And you're
Hmm.
just like leaning in. But you literally just did that right now. I could feel I was kind of flowing about this concept about purpose, and your face, it just looks like you're watching a musician on stage, and you're enjoying it vicariously, and
Yeah.
so that's a thing that you do. I hope you know that. But a lot of people, I know when I talk about you, is we feel like you are as excited for us about our thing as you would be of your own thing. So that is one of your gifts and one of your superpowers.
Thank you.
So just lean more into that.
Thank you
Yeah.
for saying that.
we should talk about, so we said
Okay.
we were going to put a pin in it, so I
Yeah.
wanted to come back to it.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to remember the question. It was, what, I want to know a little bit about your work, and I want to share that with, listeners here of what is the status quo that you see, and why do you care about changing it? So
Mm.
instead of just asking, what do you do for work? I want
Yeah.
to ask it that way.
Okay. And that kind of relates to my story, right?
Yeah.
So when I was practicing nursing, it was the very beginning, right out of nursing school, I went into senior living. And at that time it was called, skilled nursing, which we still have
Hmm.
still, but it was skilled nursing, and it was a combination of rehab and skilled and a bunch of different things. But it was, now the way I saw my story then, the way I experienced it, um, was a very toxic environment, sexually harassed twice by
Hmm.
the same person. Nothing happened to that person. Overwhelm. My perception of the leadership there, like we started talking about that too, I think at one point about, the management, just, you started sharing that about, as part of your story, like the
Yeah.
crux of being in that position. Like it's not easy. They weren't trained to do any of that well. But I didn't see it that way at the time, and it was a reason for me to leave because I was full of anxiety and depression and all of
Yeah.
that. And then going home for 18 years, homeschooling, that was the best decision I ever made. And coming back through my opportunities. So I did prevention education. We've talked about that for many years, probably 6 years, I guess, not many, but
Hmm.
6 years I focused on prevention education on chronic disease and degenerative disease and gut brain health and all that. And I did well with the company, got to do the Dr. Oz thing. And it was that at that point where I realized, oh, hey, that was 18 years ago that I was practicing. And these nursing graduates getting ready to come into the field have zero idea of what it's really going to be like. Because I
Hmm.
had talked with and interviewed seasoned nurses within senior living and otherwise who were
Yeah.
experiencing the same things that I had. So at that point, I realized, boy, number one, we're not prepared. And also talking to them, the status quo that they were going to expect coming in wasn't what they were going to get, if that makes sense.
Right. Right.
And then that proceeded, well, that
Mm.
that was a pivotal point for me in my business, going from Angie Gray Wellness to high performance nursing. Of course, we know as entrepreneurs that a lot of shifting happened, a lot of work, a lot of all those things.
Yeah.
But I created my course out of that desire to come back to my roots of nursing and to bridge the gap of what wasn't being taught at nursing school, the idea of relationship building, the idea
Mm.
of no emotional intelligence, or leader, the real crux of what leading has to have in order to do it well. And so I knew that I could do that because of the education that I had had in between times, and that 18 years that I was
Yeah.
home, and
Yeah.
my life experience. I was divorced and remarried to my same husband. I mean, just
Hmm.
real life experiences.
Yeah.
I did know that that was what I was going to do. And that's why I created the course, around self awareness, emotional intelligence, trust,
Mm.
boundaries, all the things. And through that process, interviewing a lot of nurses and nurse leaders, the stuff is still happening,
Yeah.
and people were leaving. And it was a real big learning experience, I think, through COVID. And I've talked about it like that. A very devastating experience for so many people in service, and also having families go through that. And I thought, when people came out of that, I think maybe unintentionally, for sure, it was talked about as, oh, this happened, and so these things are happening.
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
thought right away, I thought, no, this is an opportunity for us to learn that this stuff was already happening for
Right.
years. And so
Right.
what do we do with that now? And that's when I knew that I was in the right space, and this is where we have to keep going. And so that's the status quo, was people aren't doing it. My kids are, our oldest daughter is a nurse leader in
Hmm.
senior living, and she's been in it for a long time, and she's left James and come back, or not left nursing, but left different positions because of
Yeah.
the toxicity, all the things. And she would be the first to say she's also had her own growth in that time, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
understanding that I need to grow. It can't be the finger pointing at everybody else, which is a lesson I learned looking
Right.
back those
Yeah.
years
Me
ago.
too. Hmm.
Totally, I didn't know. I thought I did. Thought I totally was this awesome person. Anyway, so I sat in, and my son is a PA, and he's a cardiac surgeon PA, and my daughter is, whatever, 16 years of nurse leadership. And they sat in our living room. And I've told this story before, but I was just listening to them chat about healthcare and from totally two different worlds in healthcare, right? And TJ, his name is TJ, and he'd been in there at his current place for like 3 months, right at the 90-day mark. And they were chatting, and I think maybe I asked the question or they asked one another about, so how's it going? Oh shit, my daughter asked him, so how's it going? What do you think? And he goes, well, so far so good, but we'll see. And that was like a moment for me and going, oh, that is the epitome of the status quo. Like that is it. We'll see. Like 90 days doesn't cut it anymore. Like that used to
Right.
be, oh, we get that 90 days and we got it. And I'm not saying that's not a great benchmark still, but it's certainly not the deal anymore. People aren't going to stay unless they know that what is promised to them
Yeah.
is really going to be their experience. Um, and I do think two things. I think I've spoken out a lot about, I think it's the organization's responsibility to pour into their employees
Yeah.
and give them opportunity to grow and develop, because they have the stack this high, and to find even a little bit of time in there to grow and develop themselves is really, really stressful. That's
Yeah.
another thing we should talk about, being on LinkedIn, and how do we get what we're saying to the actual people that are suffering.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, so I do think it's both things. I think it's both the organization's responsibility, and then it's also the individual person's responsibility to grow. And I think in my experience, I don't have exact data on it, but I mean, in a high percentage of those people, when given the opportunity, are hungry for it. They're hungry
Yeah.
for that support. Um, so I don't know if that answered your question, but that is why
You.
I began doing what I'm doing, because I want to fill that gap. I want
Yeah.
them going full circle back to going to think tanking and offering that opportunity for people to grow and see what your worth and your value is, because it's so all the time, just push down, push down, push
Yeah.
down, and struggle to get up to that breath of air where you remember. So now I'm going to get all emotional. I do that, but
Mm.
I don't think that's too hardy. I don't think that's too fluffy, and that I
Yeah.
call BS on the fluffy part, because anybody will get on a podcast and talk about the bottom line and all the things that are important, but ask them about deeper, more internal things, and that becomes the challenge. So I
Yeah.
don't I don't think that that's the fluffy stuff. I think the hard stuff is the hard stuff, and
Hmm.
when we can put them together and equalize them, prioritize them the same, is when we're gonna freaking turn it around. And
Yeah.
that's why I love your work. That's why I love the people that come to Think Tank too, because we do have that mindset, and it is shifting.
Yeah. I um I love so much about what you said, and you answered my question and other questions I didn't even ask you. So that's how we operate, you and I. Okay, so a few things. Going back to your story, the problem or the status quo and why you care about changing it. It occurred to me, maybe you've not articulated this way, but I pictured like you like if I had to pick a short phrase of like what is Angie Gray doing? You're helping nurses get from book smart to street smart. So it's like in particular with like new nurses who are coming out of their educational program, what you said about people not being prepared for the reality of the professional environment of senior living and aging services. I can totally picture that. It's um, like your your house mother, right? Who like helps people get ready for, okay, this is what the real world is going to feel like. This is what they're going to throw at you. And that's so you in all ways anyway. But it kind of made me think about, okay, you're taking them from book smart to street smart, and we need leaders to be street smart when they enter our profession.
Mhm.
And then the other thing was it helped me think about what you just shared with me. Helped me think about the power of the individual person.
Mhm.
And so this is something that I think it took me a while to figure this out. And everything that I do now with all of my professional endeavors is I have put the organization kind of over to the side, and I've gone all in on the individual. So level up, Bearwise, coaching, think tank, the reason it's small. Bella Grows is a 32-bed standalone memory care community.
Yeah.
everything in my career track prior to the last few years would have said, be a person of significance at a large organization, and
Yeah.
that's how you're going to affect change. Change the organization from
Yeah.
within.
Yeah.
That was my MO.
Yeah.
And somewhere I realized, okay, that's not my thing. That's not how I'm going. Like I don't have the political savviness or the whatever it is that's going to make me become a high-powered individual at the top level of a large company. But I do really well with the garage band people. I do
Mm.
really well with
Yeah.
the people on the outskirts and the outliers because I have been one my whole life.
Yeah.
So I feel like, okay, well, that's my spot. So everything I post, everything I do, all the efforts that I pour myself into now is getting to the individual and helping them kind of reconnect within the power in themselves and
Yes.
level up. That's the whole
Yes.
name of this podcast is level up. It is an implied call to action for listeners of no one's coming to save you, no one's coming to save us, and the organization is not going to change itself.
Yeah.
You have to change. And I think in the long run, Angie, when there are enough of us that realize we have all the power,
Yeah.
like we really do. And think about if every caregiver at Bella Groves one day said, "We're gone," you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
we don't believe in what you're, in this hypothetical scenario, but I mean, literally, they have all the power. They could all just say, "We're going to stop working," and they could go get another job the next day. And the organization has such little power when you think about it in that context. And so I think about forget the organization, get to the individual, help them level up, help them be empowered. Find these little study groups, think tank, where we can encourage each other. These are basically your workout buddies. These are not, you know, people at whatever level. They are your workout buddies in that kind of future change oriented perspective. So I think one thing that I would say about in response to what you said is organizations do need to change, but I don't think I've kind of stopped the route of trickle down, like get to the top leader, and then hopefully they'll change the organization.
Yeah.
Um, because I think the people who are most likely to do that are already kind of on their journey.
Mhm.
So I do work with organizations and top leaders who I can come in and support what they're doing. So, but that has almost become a byproduct, Angie. Like that's not a conscious thing that I go after in the market. But because I focus on the individual leader just kind of self-selects in. And so Michael Morris, who you met last year
Yeah.
at Think Tank, he was one of those people who was like, "Hey, I would love to take a bit of what we're doing here and bring it to my organization." So I did that.
Yeah.
Um, AccuShield, there's somebody that they sent somebody last year, Deontay, and they're sending somebody else this year. And now the CEO, Charles Mann, he's also going to come to Think Tank this year. And then, off to the side, he's like, I would really love to do this at AccuShield.
Yes.
So in no way do I advertise any of that stuff about like, let me come to your organization and help. I
Mhm.
have gone all in on individual. And I think because of that, the organizations are kind of
Yes.
identifying themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. And so let me tell you what I think and tell me what you think about what I
Yeah.
think. So so when I'm saying the organization, I guess I have definite alignment with what your approach has been.
Mhm.
Going to like most of the work that I'm doing, I'm being asked to come and coach or speak.
Yeah.
And so the coaching is the individual person, which that's what I'm asking. So going to the organization is to say, so you don't even need to worry almost kind of like
Yeah.
if you have buy-in enough to realize that these people have it within them,
Yeah.
understand their worth and value, and to understand the power that they have to show up and build relationships and build trust and do all the things, then let's do that. And so that's the partnership that I love is if an organization says, yes, come in, we believe in our people, let
Yeah.
me help them be supported in that way. And that's been great because
Yeah.
obviously, coaching is such a cool part and I have found that it just takes so little.
Hmm.
It takes so little for people to respond to the remembering,
Yeah.
the remembering of, oh, that, like in my some of my stuff I talk about, when we're born, and we've all probably heard this scenario, but when we're born, we don't doubt we have all this confidence, to create.
Yeah.
You just shared with your
Hmm.
little girl who's so precious, doing her stickers wherever she wants. She has this confidence to create,
Yeah.
be, and to experiment and try new things. That's hard, like real life as a nurse or nurse leader, that's hard. It's easy for me to sit here and say it's harder. Like when you said, as an entrepreneur, we have more freedom to do that. As an actual person in an organization, depending on the organization, you don't always have the autonomy
Right.
to make those decisions and to
Right.
do
Right.
creative things. So personally, that's why I think it's really, really important as an organization understanding that, oh, they're not actually entrepreneurs, they're actually showing up for me,
Yeah.
this organization. And so I want to make sure that I'm giving them the opportunity to be
Totally.
and to grow. If I don't, and going back to the reality really is 99% of the nurses and nurse leaders that I'm talking to, they would love to have the time to go to think tank.
Yeah.
You know why? They're not, well, now they're being personally invited and stuff, and that's awesome. But people don't have the time. And you mentioned earlier you were going to ask me this, and so it's good that we came back to this. Or maybe it
Hmm.
was Nicole that asked me in our interview. But that's one of the things I thought of at Think Tank when I sat and listened to the amazing things that were happening, the ideas and the perspective and the pouring into about all the things, um, business and emotional intelligence wise. I thought, oh, I'm the only nurse here, and I'm not even practicing. So let's just say I had an
Yeah.
organization. So we're having these AccuShield. These guys are sending these organizations, amazing organizations, having the forethought to send somebody to bring back. That's a big, big stinking job. I just
Yeah.
actually talked about this at where I was just doing my teaching and stuff, and at 12 Oaks, and I sat at a table with some resident care directors, and
Yeah.
we were talking about just this same thing, that it's great to go do that, but to have one person, even from that situation where it was cool, like this trifecta, high 12
Yeah.
Oaks listening, it was a great thing that they're doing, and they are kind of exceptional, like you all at Bella Groves, but those nurse leaders that were at that table said that's very challenging for me to get this back to my people and be expected to, do that as well. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where I come in and go, man, if we can please just, I'll just check a box, or whoever it is, right? Not me or whoever, just check the box of making sure you give them the opportunity to be poured into, not twice a year. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, and I always compare it to a marriage, that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
If you are so busy, and we're Todd, from instance, I share a lot about Todd and myself. I have my own business. He's got his own business. We have 7 kids. We got a bajillion things happening all the time, and it's barely like we see each other, right?
Yeah.
We have to intentionally set aside time weekly. Weekly to have what we call our Sunday sit downs, and those don't always look great because it's you have to practice it. You have to
Yeah.
practice the
Yeah.
behavior so that the mindset shifts, so that the next time the shoot hits the fan, you
Hmm.
show up better. And so anyway, that just goes back to the organization. It makes business sense to me. What I
Yeah.
talk about is business. I mean, it
Totally.
is the logical part of it. And we cannot, the same thinking that we've had, we cannot maintain that. And going back to the status quo, we cannot we cannot continue that thinking that it's all the business smart. It's all the stuff that's important and it's essential for a successful business is as important as the inner stuff that has to be addressed. People are
Yeah.
drowning, and we just got to throw them a life raft. That's it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So you get me on my pedestal here, and that's what I passionately believe. It's not just the nursing students. Yes, it's there, but it's the one that are kicking their butts right now every single day and trying to show up and fully love the people that
Yeah.
they're taking care of and serving, and they just need to have their buckets filled.
Yeah. I love that. I'm gonna listen back to that a few times. I really am because one of the things I try to be of be of value to other people is when I hear their story, how do I reflect it back to them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we did that at the think tank. We do that in just friendships and
Yeah.
in close relationships. And what I when I hear you speak, first of all, let me say this in a big perspective. I think it's such a beautiful thing when people show interest in other people's story that they can tell it. Get on your soapbox, get on your pedestal, do those things, but but to have an engaged audience that's leaning in, like, tell me more, not just tell
Yeah.
me, but tell me more. And I think that active storytelling allows you to refine your story.
Yeah.
The more that you can tell it and tell it succinctly or clearly, the more that you can understand, oh, these are the things that are resonating with people. And so that has to be an element of my story,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And by the way, that's also why I post so frequently on LinkedIn, is that it is constant market validation of what is resonating with other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that you
So,
can serve at a higher level. Yes.
right. And my content just gets clearer and better over time because I
Mhm.
constantly am surveying what is resonating with people and what's not. I'll post some things thinking, "Oh my God, this is great. This is going to be amazing." And then, like, it has such little
Yeah.
engagement. And then I have to go back and look at, well, what are the elements of that that didn't, connect to other people? And so, anyway, that was just an
Can I
aside
ask
of,
a question on that? Thank you
yeah,
for
yeah.
saying you're going to go back and listen, and I want to hear what your feedback is, how I can do that more successfully. Here's the thing that I've noticed also. Excuse me.
Mhm.
Um, when I share a story about an experience I've had personally as a nurse, or share a story confidentially, about another
Yeah.
nurse's experience or nurse leader's experience, whatever. If it has a tone of negativity, I get more response.
Hmm.
And that's challenging. I'm just being like real honest. That's
Oh, I
challenging
know what you mean. Yep.
because I can tell you a story every single solitary day about the BS that happens every single day and about the people that are struggling and are arguing or having conflict, and then I need to turn that around and tell you what I really think about that. I do think that sucks. That
Yeah.
sucks that it's still staying that way, and so it's this and it's that, but so that is a challenge to sort of step out of my own self.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Is it the right thing? Is it the best thing to do to be constantly showing you, well, here's the crap that's happening and here's how we could think. Because I think this
Mm.
is what I think, and there's the whole crux of it. What are we thinking? But
Yeah.
like I think it's our mindset. So it's not that the actual, you know, stuff isn't happening, but it's how can we change the way we see it so
Mm.
that we don't have to experience it like that anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't that makes sense either,
I
but it's
I
a
think I understand.
yeah.
So let me repeat back. I think what my understanding of the premise or the question is um I think what I'm hearing you say is that you sometimes feel the pressure of having to have a negative spin on the content that you share in order to get engagement, but that's not but it's not really what you want to do, is like to
Mhm,
constantly put out, here's all the negative stuff, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
something along those lines.
Yep, yep.
And yeah, so the way that I relate to that is I think about, certainly earlier in my LinkedIn posting, I totally understand what you mean, because when I would call out, here's all the crap happening in senior living, or here's all the bad experiences I've had, flood,
Yeah,
comments,
yeah.
engagement, right? Shares of like, oh my God, I had that too. And engagement for engagement's sake is not very helpful. At the end of the day, you have to think about content and marketing and all your efforts. It's like, are you connecting the dots in a way where you get to affect change in the way that you want to affect change, right? So for me anyway, it's not the right recipe, but it's the one I'm working with right now. Is Actually, I'm going to pause because I can ask you. See, this is the whole value of asking people. When you think about my content right
Yeah.
now,
Mhm.
whatever ones that actually just pop up on your screen, um, gut feeling reaction, is the tone positive or negative
Yep.
generally?
Positive.
Okay, so in your gut, you feel like generally this is positive tone.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So maybe 4 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. I think,
Mhm.
you know, it would have been, I'm in the depth of my frustration and I want people to feel it and people are,
Yeah.
like engaging with this. Yeah. Now I thought about, okay, I just need to channel that thing. I need to distill what is the thing people are frustrated
Yeah.
about. And then I need to channel it through my content in a way where I bring awareness to it, but
Mhm.
it's not the thing that the
Yeah.
post is about, right?
Yeah.
The frustration is context, but the engagement, the thing that I'm trying to put forth, either in thought leadership or just from a content perspective, is I'm just clearly identifying the problem. And then let me get to the meat of what's a viable solution. Tell me about this route. Tell me about this solution. What has been your experience? And so, generally, when you look at the comments of a post that you make or a post that I make, the
Mhm.
comments tell me it's the market validation of, was my post um, stirring negative conversation, or is my post stirring solutions oriented conversation?
Yeah.
And I get a mix. But
Yeah.
generally, if I look at the comment section, I know what people interpreted by my
Yeah.
post, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I can look at that and say, oh, look at all these discussions regarding solutions. Or like when I post about Bella Groves, I will now post the thing that we do. Sometimes I'll call out, hey, it's pretty common in senior living dementia care to XYZ. And then the rest of the post is about, here's what we are doing about that. Here's
Yeah.
what we're actually doing, not theory, but here's actually what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at the comments, you'll hear things like, I wish every memory care was like this, or, they'll ask a question about how do you do this? And that type of engagement is great because it's moving towards some kind of a future state.
Solution.
But,
Yeah.
3, 4 years ago, I think if you were to look at my post, lots of engagement, likes, but all the comments would have been like, oh my God, same old story, like it's just people venting and frustrated. And then I have to self examine, okay, the content only gave people a space to vent, but it did not put forth a viable solution for people to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I know you're trying to do, and that's what I hope to do too, because we believe that I believe we have the answers within us, and when we can engage and talk about it, it gives us the opportunity to figure that out, to problem
Yeah.
solve together, and realize that we don't going back to what you first started saying,
Mhm.
that we don't have control over the organization. I don't have control over anything except for
Yeah.
my own thoughts,
Right.
and how I act them out, how I show up for me and others.
Yeah.
Um, I did have a comment from someone I really, really respect the other day, and I actually need to call her back and ask her about it. She's an incredible nurse leader, not in senior living, but we're going to work together to do some things in senior living. She's amazing.
Mhm.
Um, she said it was about, I shared a story of it wasn't a coaching thing, but it was sort of a chemistry call. And this particular nurse leader was really challenged in this relationship. She was having conflict, and so I was just really there to listen and just reflect back to her the things she said. And at the end of the day, it
Yeah.
was really about her leading the conversation. And do you think you've done everything you can, or is there more? And then she'd answer her own questions and stuff. And
Mhm.
so then I shared a little bit about that, and then that was really what my solution part was asking yourself those questions. Is the story that I'm telling about this situation, is it actually true? It's a lot of Byron Katie's work, if you know her. um, and then my friend's comment was, I need to ask her about it, but it was more of, hey, did you tell her she can also leave? Did you tell her that? And then there was another really good comment too that said, did you tell her that she can be a nurse coach, or she can be an entrepreneur, all of those things.
Mhm.
Then those comments get a little more challenging for me, because
Mhm.
particularly the ones that would say, do you tell her to leave? Because I'm never here to make anybody's decisions for them.
Mm.
I'm there to help them discover what their own solutions are.
Right.
And then, it's always on the table if it comes to that, where I can offer
Yeah.
suggestions if they allow me to do that. But anyway, yeah, the challenging ones of I do think what you're saying is true, kind of thing. I agree with that, and without writing a whole nother post. Anyway, that's the part that takes time, is to really honor the perspective of other people. And I learn more. I actually feel like I say this all the time. I feel like I could take everyone else's content and just like
Mhm.
put it up because it's so good. There's so many really
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
people like yourself that are saying really, really important things. Um, and I love watching the conversation that happens in comments, in good
Mm.
content that's happening. Um, anyway, I think I was digressing with that, but yeah, I was
Well,
totally.
I have a thought related to that. So going
Okay.
back to that book, you should order it now.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, tell me it one more time, and the audience one more time. I'm gonna write down.
Feel Like an Artist, by Austin Kleon,
Steel,
K-L-E,
steel.
Steele,
Yeah.
Steele, yeah. Steele Like an Artist. The thing that I wanted to say about what you just remarked on, Angie, is that yes, there is a lot of great content out there, and I'm really, really thrilled for it. When I started posting a lot on LinkedIn in I don't know, however many years ago, there was not much, So I mean, it was like I really felt like being one of the first on the gold rush of thought leadership and content on LinkedIn for senior living. So I think I just kind of caught the wave a little bit early, but now um, you look in every corner and people are bringing better and better content on LinkedIn, which is great. So the if you take to heart the core lesson of Steal Like an Artist is you just have to synthesize and create your own version of what you love out there. And you do it in your own voice. So if you like my stuff, if you like their stuff, his stuff, you, I think the head part of Head and Heart is for you to examine, well, how do I um, how do I deconstruct this and label the parts,
Mm,
right? So not just I liked what James posted, but you're really thinking about, okay, what are the parts to this? What was the intro? What was the hook? What
yeah.
was the call to action?
Yeah.
Was there a photo? Was there not a photo? And figuring those things out, because every artist knows how they do what they do.
Mhm.
They know it. They may not even be able to explain it to other people, but let's just take a painter for example who has a very specific like way of doing their paintings. They know how they do their foundation. They
Yeah.
know what colors are gonna be on brand with their stuff. They know the recipe of their own art, and then they go just experiment with it all the time. If you put me to it, I could probably label the parts of a LinkedIn post for me. For you, you have to figure out that recipe as well. You're reverse engineering the stuff that you love so that you can engineer it for yourself. And the
Mhm.
good news is you have lots of people that you can draw that inspiration from and decide, okay, I'm going to take salt from this one, I'm going to take pepper from that one, and okay, I've got all the parts now. Now let me go experiment with this recipe that I've come up with. And
Mhm.
and then when you post, like that's the stuff I think that you learn over time of here's my story, here's the thing that I want to help change, and then here's the content that I'm putting out to let people opt in to this work. And
Mhm.
I think the more that you have a feel for that, the more effective you'll be.
Mhm.
And I can relate to the frustration of feeling like I have this thing within myself and I know it's important and I know that it would be valuable for other people, but the disconnect, which is really sales, marketing, storytelling, and strategy, is how do I get from this feeling to an outcome or behavior change in the people I want to work with? And that's the difference between people who are like effective and successful in their business, or they're sitting years down the road with all this story and all this heart, but no actual results.
Yep.
And for me, Bearwise and Level Up, all the things, it is really capturing that idea that senior living is littered with people who have tremendous heart, but they haven't always brought in the head piece to figure out, okay, here's how you do content marketing. Here's how you do financial planning. Here's how you do prospecting. Here are all the different things that I need to learn about the business side of me so that I'm not just like, what good is it if you are preaching your story and it feels good to get all of that out of you, but it doesn't lead to a job. It doesn't lead to a partnership. It doesn't lead to
Yeah,
a payday, right?
100%.
Yeah,
Yes.
and those things have to happen. Otherwise, you're just on a soapbox for the sake of being on a soapbox.
Yeah.
So I think the more that we level up ourselves, I keep coming back to the same old themes, but
Oh,
it
so
it
good.
goes
Yeah.
back to the beginning of our conversation about like coming up with good names, right?
Yeah.
So, um, but it is at the end of the day, going back to that idea that you are on your own. You are responsible for your own success, and whether other people understand your value proposition to them is not their fault. So, if they're not engaging with your posts, if they're not working with you, it's not because they don't care. It's because you haven't done your part.
Can I say how, first of all, how
Mm.
great that is? And
Yeah.
here's what's going through my mind.
Mhm.
It's we're saying the same things.
Yeah.
And thank you. Thank you. Because I love learning and I do dissect.
Yeah.
And you've done a great job actually of sharing with all of us, your process. And
Mm.
that's really been helpful to me. I'm also thinking of that's the same thing I'm saying for an organization.
Yeah. Totally.
Or the same thing I'm saying when you go to think tank.
Hmm.
So my input, my feedback, and you're already on it, I know it, is when we're at think tank, it is. If you're sending that one person there, how does that person, because that person is one person. So how are
Yeah.
they going to show them? They don't know. They just went and learned all this really cool stuff there. How
Right.
am I supposed to go back and, do this?
Mm.
You're gonna be that. And
Yeah.
then that is a way that we pay it forward in the little moments. I call those the miracle moments, because you're showing up as a better human where you would have responded or reacted this way. It's different now, all
Mm.
the things in a bigger, because I don't want to say that, because it is impactful. One person, like that's what we're
Mhm.
saying, to one person
Yeah,
has
I know
the power
what you
to
mean.
change everything. And so it's both of those things. That's full circle too. What we just said an hour ago is both things. It's this, your responsibility, taking accountability for who you are, your growth, all the things. And as an organization, to Spider-Man's,
Mhm.
great quote, with great power comes great responsibility. There's where I go, okay, so it doesn't make sense if you don't provide the learning experience for these people. So just the same thing you just said about a LinkedIn experience and content marketing
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
same thing for an organization. So
Right.
you're barely hitting the mark your possibilities have. I mean, your possibilities are infinite, but you
Yeah.
can only do the one thing. Just like me, if I only went on and didn't
Mhm.
care, and about like actually connecting with my audience, what good is that? Great, you think I'm nice and you hear some really
Yeah.
cool things here and there, but if I'm not able to actually work with you, I'm not actually connecting with you and making an impact so that you're, thinking differently, your mindset shifts, whatever my thing is. Same thing for the organization. I can
Yeah.
say and do
Yeah.
all these things, but if my people aren't happy and they aren't feeling part of this bigger mission that we have, if we're
Yeah.
just all lip service and we don't even pour into them, like a marriage, it's a relationship,
Mhm.
act as if and keep doing the same things, right? So it was just interesting to hear that. And then
Yeah.
yeah, that's the same thing we're talking about. It's all about relationships with me, myself,
Yeah.
and how our relationships are, impacting the success that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. What I like about what you shared, and the thing I want to reiterate for listeners is that we can create the moment of inspiration, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's a LinkedIn post or an event or a phone call, whatever it is, you can create the moment of inspiration. But the real work at hand, which I think is what you are really going after, is let's put an action plan together and
Yeah.
then let's execute that action plan. So,
Yeah.
and it's a fundamental limitation of something like the think tank. As great as it is, it's 3 days, once a year.
Mhm.
And so, what do you do with that inspiration
Yes.
that you found and the tools that you were given? And then, how do I go put that in place?
Yeah.
And not everybody has had the training or the resources or the mentors or guides to put that in place.
Mhm.
So it's like if you show everybody a movie and the movie's great, and then you're like, okay, now I want you to go make a movie. I was
Yeah.
like, well, I don't
Exactly.
know how to make a movie. That
Yes.
was a great movie, but I don't know how to do that.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a lot of what I feel about your work and what you're trying to do is I want to help you make the movie. I want to help you, like, here's how you do it. Here are all the parts to it, and here's how we move that forward.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways your work can transcend an inspirational moment, and it goes over to execution. Let me high performance nursing, right? Let me help you perform the
Yeah.
act of this nursing leadership.
Yeah, yeah. And think tank is actually doing that. That's making me think of, the small group work that we do
Yeah.
in creating, things for organizations to take advantage of. And I hope that I want to make sure that I'm doing a really good job this year too, and better than I
Yeah.
did last year of making people aware of those tools. That's an idea. Like everybody take this home to your organization and let's create
Hmm.
a plan that how you're going to implement this particular resource. How
Yeah.
that's one thing you can do, and that could be
I love it.
cool thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really great idea, Angie. I think that we pack so much in the think tank that I think about this is a lesson I learned as a training and development person is what can you leave out? What can you leave out and it's still the core thing? And I used to do training events where it was like I was completely gassed. I was completely out of breath, out of content. I didn't cover everything. And and the people were like, "Oh my God, okay, that was great, but that was
What
too
did you
much."
say?
Right. And so I have been on this journey over the last few years about like how do I, and that came through in some of the storytelling themes of Think Tank, is how do you take as much out as you can,
Mhm.
but it still is the core thing that you want people to experience.
Yeah.
And so this recommendation that you just brought in, it goes through that filter now again of, man, that would be such a great addition to Think Tank.
Mhm.
But how do I remove stuff and it's still the core
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah.
And I think I'm having this kind of thought live right now,
Okay.
is that we don't have to, like, Nicole and I don't have to do all of those things because there are people like you who are like,
Oh yeah, we talked
um,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, and it's this, for the people who want to again opt in, and
Yeah.
for people you are, when I say an alumnus, and and the alumni of Think Tank, I really mean that. These are people who have gone through and learned and gained the experience so that the next year you come back, you're a little bit more, you're a little wiser to, hey guys, this
Right.
is what I experienced last year that was great. Here was some limitation I found in executing, these insights. And so anybody who wants to talk about that, let's go have lunch together.
Yeah, and here's why I had the
Hmm.
experience.
Yeah.
Well, like these are some actions that I took, and you get what you are going to get, what
Yeah.
you say you're going to
Well,
get.
and that's paying it forward, but with an action plan.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That'll be fun to
Yeah.
talk about. Yeah, I think that always feels like that when you leave any sort of thing. And think tank, I don't feel think tank. You said pack so much in. I did not feel like think tank packed
Mm,
so much in. There was a lot of what am I going to do with this now and how, because I was excited to. Okay,
yeah.
I've got so that would be something that I think is always good for any conference. Okay, so now what are you
Yeah.
going to do and make a commitment? We do that. We say what's the next best step you're going to take? How are you going to take this home? And
Hmm.
whatever. But yeah, there's so much good that happens that one of those things that we could take away
Yeah.
home would be a great thing to do.
Well, I'm totally excited you're going to be back for a
To
second year, and it is astounding, really, to think about, Angie, that we were together in the same space 8 months ago, and we're about to see each other again like 4 months from now. And how is it that I feel as close to you as I do, and we will basically only see each other in person once a year?
no, isn't that a trip?
Yeah, it is a trip.
Yes, it really is a really gift. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful. I'm so
Well, me
grateful.
too. Time really flies by. I feel like we just finished Think Tank 2023, and then here we are gearing up for the next one.
You know,
Um, we covered a lot. I mean, I'm gonna have to go back and think through what is this episode's title? Like, what am I gonna try to synthesize this down into, like topic wise?
You
And
know
if
what
you
you
think,
said to me? You know what you said to me? I want to share
yeah.
with the audience is that when we were pre-talking or whatever,
Hmm.
you're like, I don't, you said it better, but like, you didn't want to be on talking about think tank. It wasn't about talking about think tank. We're
Yeah,
going to talk
true.
about
Yeah.
me and what I did and whatever. But not about think tank. If that
Hmm.
came up, and it did, and it came up organically over and over and over, and it was organic
Yeah.
because that is where our relationship really started. And so literally, and this is not a plug for think tank because
Hmm.
it just literally so much really has shifted for me
Yeah.
going back to, and
Yeah.
you've been really great, and I've talked about it a lot, about not just now but outside in our content about mindset. And for us both,
Yeah.
listening, taking time to listen to the inner guidance, connect with whatever that is for you, and to be, that's like this first step of learning to trust yourself,
Yeah.
and developing that relationship with you. And so it was me asking for help, actually, because I was in desperation. I was like, this stinks. And what am I supposed to do? And I
Yeah.
asked, so I was willing to see things differently, and then trusting that the answer did come, and then following those instincts, that intuition, that nudge, whatever. Um, and so that was great that we
Mm.
talked about it, because there has been, and I like to think, and I am going to claim that okay, that's weird for me, but I do know, I believe that I did have a part in the shift that I see and that I
Yeah.
feel in this last year.
Yeah.
And maybe it is only because I'm paying more attention, right? Because it
Hmm.
shifted as they did. And I
Yeah.
look at the people that were there, and so many of them, the ones that were able and willing to think differently and to see things differently, then
Yeah.
these actions followed. And I'm grateful. I'm just really grateful. So
Mm.
yeah, that was funny that we said we really were going to talk about it, and
And
it,
then it became the whole conversation,
that's
right?
what
But
the
it,
title will be, is we're not going to talk about think tank.
right, yeah, that's the title of the movie. We're not
Yes.
going to talk about think tank, and then it's thing. But but it is. I think more than anything, it's just a word. It's just a phrase. It's a
Yeah.
vehicle for the thing that we're actually talking about, which is how do we inspire one another? How do we find a cohort of others that we want to be inspired by, and then how do we put all of that stuff into action?
Yeah.
Which is really, take the words think tank out, and that's the meat of what we discussed is how do we find that light within ourselves? How do we inspire and bring other people close to us that are we had this phrase that came out of it, our event, which is not to be said again,
Yeah.
but we had this thing where we talked about like-hearted people, not like-minded people,
Yes.
like-hearted people.
Yes.
And so, this whole experience for us, I think, has been how do you find like-hearted people? How do you take what you're inspired by and put it into action? How do you pay it forward with an action plan? It's all of those things. And I think I heard you say it in the comment before, is that you said, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but I'd like to think that I had a little part to play in, the way that things are
Yeah.
changing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's good. I should have said that. I want to take that back.
Okay.
I know this in my mind. I would say
Yeah.
it to someone else. I feel like that's false humbleness. Like, it's not.
Mhm.
There's a difference, right? And I think that's probably what you're gonna say.
Yes.
You go then.
Yeah. No, I want to hear you're my guest. I want, yeah.
That's it. It's, I do know I had a part in it, and I do
Yeah.
know that I am here for a purpose, and I am walking in my purpose. And
Mm.
otherwise, why would I do it? If I didn't know and believe, and surely we have our times of, oh my gosh, am I even making a difference? All those doubt things that come in and
Right.
blah blah blah. But no, I do think I matter. I do think what I'm
Yeah.
doing is important, and I do think it has impacted people's lives because, again, full circle back to what you mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
I do have people that are kind enough and know how important it is to give feedback, and
Yeah.
that matters. And so, and it's my job, and part of what I love doing is telling you the same thing, that
Yeah.
you impacted me, and you
Mm.
you made a difference for me, and you all have it in you. And I hope to God, in my job, the thing that brings me the most joy
Yeah.
is to have this, sometimes it just feels like a little inclination, and when you're in that little space, it's like, wow, I can't believe I get to be part of this. When you're reflecting back to someone
Yeah.
who they are, like, their greatness, like, if you think I'm awesome, that's just because you're seeing you, you know
Hmm.
it's so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah.
That's anyway. So yeah, that was false. That was an old mindset. The better mindset, the more truth is,
Yeah.
yeah, I do know I'm making
I
a
love
difference.
it.
Yeah.
Man, I love that so much, Angie. It is about owning your story, and we talked a lot about like giving yourself permission. And the
Yes.
Marianne Williamson quote that we ended Think Tank on about,
That's when
yeah,
I knew we were going to be friends, when you said,
yeah, but it felt like such the right moment to share that quote in the room with the people. It just felt like the right moment to share it. But it is about giving yourself permission to shine, and that your presence there, it liberates other people to feel that same permission in themselves, and that's what senior living should be. And I love that self-corrected here, in that of course you are impacting the way that the environment and the landscape of senior living, on LinkedIn, which translates to in real life, because you had that most recent experience with 12 Oaks, and we've all in some way taken the experience of Think Tank and then applied it in a way that it was going to create some change. And you are darn right that I intended for that to happen.
that's
That's
right.
not incidental. That wasn't like, oh,
Yeah.
turns out this thing happened, right? Um, we went into that headspace. We went into that with the intention of, we're going to create something that sparks change. And when I look at LinkedIn, if I give myself permission to be proud of it,
Yes.
I know what LinkedIn was like 5 years ago,
Yeah.
7 years ago, and it is completely different now. And of course, there's the false humility that says, just give credit everywhere. But if I really strip it down, I know that I had a big part in the way that people give themselves permission on LinkedIn. I found that inspiration from other people, and I know that in part I played that inspiration for people moving forward. So I think this is about reclaiming, or just claiming, our gift and our presence in this life, in this world, and certainly in our profession. So, um, what a beautiful thing that we get to do, and really positive note to end our
Yeah.
conversation on. You know, Really, most of our conversations are like this, Angie. It's just we happen to record this one. Although I have to say, I think that this conversation, because of the idea that we're on camera and this is being recorded, I think you and I were sharper today than we,
Much sharper. I
yeah, it normally are.
leveled it up for us,
That's
James.
right. That's right. The pressure of having to record this actually made us a little bit sharper. But I so appreciate you, Angie, and I'm glad that we met, and that we'll get to work together again at Think Tank in Austin.
Yes.
And thanks for being on today.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me so much. Thank you. Thank you.
I hope this episode was helpful for our listeners. And if you want to connect with Angie, we will leave all the links in the podcast notes, and certainly on LinkedIn. Connect with Angie, connect with me, and let's keep the conversation going. Let's continue to inspire one another. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Level Up Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and its YouTube channel. Better yet, share it with someone you know who is on their own leadership development journey. I hope you'll be back for the next episode of Level Up. But until then, I hope that you are leading well, and remember that you are living your legacy today. So, make it a good one.